of reviewers left a comment, "I'm very much interested in learning the correct process to build up a painting, and the reason why you'd want to do this." Well, there's a process, but it might not be correct. Or the reason it might not be correct is that there really is no such thing as a correct process for building a painting. Artists over the centuries have taken standard methods and built their own process. So let's just go down the list of the processes and something that you might want to always do, and then some variations on that. So there are only really two processes that artists use to build paintings. One is alla prima. That means the process all happens in one session of painting. Or the sustained painting, and that is when a painting is developing over a period of time. So underneath those two, a number of things can happen, but they do have a couple of things in common. And that is, one thing that you would always want to do when building a painting, or I should say when getting ready to build the painting, is to study the subject, to get familiar with the subject. If you don't, then you're going into that painting sort of unprepared, without really knowing anything about the subject that you're doing. So artists who are successful are always going to be studying their subject. That's whether you're doing alla prima or sustained painting. The other thing that the two have in common are setting up the palette of colors. And why would you want to do that? Because you want to be organized. You want to have the palette of colors already sort of planned before you begin, so that you can move right into the painting without having to guess. Now, those are the two things that both methods have in common. Well, there are some things that are standard among most successful painters, but maybe not always present. Now, so I'm going to go through those with you and tell you why. For one thing, most painters will start off with some sort of preliminary drawing. What that means is that there are certain lines that get placed on the canvas in order to simply place the image. You won't find, if any, many really professional painters who are going to draw everything by detail and then fill it in. That's not the way it's done. The preliminary drawing serves to place the image on the canvas, and it's usually done in as few lines as possible. So there'll be certain measurements that might be there to keep things in proportion. Whatever the painter needs in order to pull the painting off, that usually will happen in the preliminary drawing. The next thing that most painters do is block in. Now, there are several methods to block in, and I'm just going to kind of list those, but I'm going to move over here now and show you my method of block in, but also tell you that there are so many variations on block in that it would make this quick tip too long to explain them to you. My method of block in is to block in with no tan. And so what that means is I start with the subject, and then I find the areas of the subject that are in shadow and areas not in shadow, and I create a no tan like you see here. Now, this simply means that when I start the painting, I will know that all areas that are in shadow are going to be in the shadow values and the shadow colors, and all areas not in shadow are going to be in the shadow values, and the not in shadow values and not in shadow colors. Now, while I'm on here, I said artists will set up their palette. This was back in the beginning part. All things that all painters have in common, and this is the way I set up the palette. I simply look for the colors that I see in the scene, and I set up a palette that I know is going to give me all those colors. So that's kind of backtracking a little bit. That's to show you that. Now, the other thing that most painters will do in the process is to work general to specific. And that's so that you can, the reason for that is so that you can have a foundation onto which to build details. So if you start out with details, the whole thing can develop into an awkward piece. Now I'm going to show you here, just as a sample, or as an example. In this particular scene, I'll just put this back up here like this. In this particular scene here, this is the block in, or this is the working general to specific. You can see here that I'm working on top of this No 10, which I've used as the block in. Now, block in also can be interpreted to mean to continue with color. It also can mean part of the general, working in the general areas. And what that means is simply I'm working generally in the dark or the shadow areas in this part, and then I'm working as I move on to the more specific. Now I'll put this down here now so that you can see the two comparison, see the two together. Now you can see this is generally the area of dark blocked in, that continues the block in from the No 10, and then this is generally the area of block in of the areas that are not in shadow. And that's the way I work, general to specific. So you do the large areas first and work dark to light, and then you leave the details to the very end. Now this doesn't have the details in it yet. You can see though, by working that way, if I put this back up here, you can see now that by working this way, by setting in the general areas, large shapes first, large dark shapes, large middle valley shapes, large light shapes, by working those first, then I have the stage set, and then I can move in there and I can place whatever details I want, whatever highlights or whatever accents. Highlights will be the lightest lights, so I can go in and find those. I could find if there were twigs or little areas of those trees that I wanted to accent, I could do that. In other words, I have this set here now so that I could take that in any direction I wanted to. I could stop it early so it would be more of a semi-abstract, not quite so realistic, or I could continue to build it until it's a totally realistic painting. So this is generally how to build a painting, and I've tried to explain to you why as we went along. Now, keep in mind, all painters have their own methods of building a painting, and most of them will contain variations on what I've just described for you here. So what I would advise, if you don't know how to build a painting, select a very general process like this. You don't have to use the No 10 here like I did there. You could simply start out with a preliminary drawing and start out with just blocking in the dark shapes. But if you have a process, just like when building a house, you have a process. You set the foundation first, you set the structure, and then you put in the details. And you can use that same process for building a painting, and usually you're going to come out with a painting with which you can be very pleased. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianeMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.